And what is going on, guys? And welcome back. We are doing another stream. I got my guy Matt Churko with me of the Mo Sports Network. So
Yes,
it's
sir.
been a little bit, been exactly a month since we chopped it up. It was a rough night, not how I expected to go, as we did a little Knicks and Sixers pregame, and the Knicks ultimately cruised to a victory in that one. And the vibes have certainly switched, I think, from that point in time for both franchises. So before we dive fully into it, Matt, how we doing today?
I'm feeling good, brother. I appreciate you having me on. And, always love talking with the pick swap guys. Thank you to everybody tuning in. My guy, Maine, in the chat. What's happening, bro? Hope you're doing well. Like you said, a lot has changed. The whole landscape almost of the NBA feels like has switched up in just a quick month. I'm really excited because Knicks, Sixers are obviously two teams at the top of the Eastern Conference that are looking to make some moves towards the deadline. Both teams, dealing with some injuries and trying to pivot off of that, trying to just stay afloat, like we had mentioned earlier. And I'm really curious to see the Philadelphia perspective on what you guys think we should do and what you also think the Philadelphia 76ers should do. And we didn't even talk about this. I want to hear your thoughts as well on Milwaukee head coach Doc Rivers and, the new saga going on over there, because obviously Doc, he left the city of Philadelphia not exactly on the best of terms. And you see now his old ways are still catching up to him. The Bucks are out there blowing big leads in the fourth quarter. So some things don't change. Death taxes, Doc Rivers blowing leads in the fourth quarter. So I'm excited to chat some basketball and hear who you have in mind. So first things first, you want to kick it off. We had said we'll start with the New York Knicks. Man, what can you say about this Knicks team? Now, from an outside perspective, are the Knicks a legitimate Eastern Conference contender, or is this just my fandom, taking over right here?
Yeah, no, I honestly believe so. I am buying what the Knicks are selling. That obviously that loss to the Lakers snapped an 8-game winning streak, but still 9-1 in their last 10. Jalen Brunson playing like a fringe MVP candidate. The guy is the real deal, and he just totally rocks. Like, the guy is a straight up winner. It's been very cool to see him grow to these levels in a way that, frankly, I don't think anyone could have guessed that he could get to this level of stardom at the NBA level. And Brunson's been a guy that has kind of overperformed at every single level he's been. That we saw him front and center here at Villanova. Cool to see him be the guy that kind of led the charge on that team. And then obviously in Dallas stepping up when Luka was out. And now he kind of has the center stage to run things. So it's been cool to see his identity grow as he takes control of this team. And the rest of the Villanova boys doing their thing as well. Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo. And of course, OG has been a pretty hand in glove fit since that. So I am buying into the Knicks. And frankly, if you ask me straight up, and I'm ranking the Eastern Conference right now, it would be the Boston Celtics number 1, the New York Knicks number 2 from my point of view.
Wow. Now, what is it about this Knicks team that you think puts them ahead of a squad like Milwaukee, who has seen playoff success even beyond what the Knicks are, of course, used to in the past few years? A guy like Giannis, a lot of times when the Knicks are mentioned in conversations with these upper echelon Eastern Conference teams, it comes down to, well, the other team always has that better player. So, how do you take the Knicks over a team like the Bucks right now? Because a lot of people, if I was to put that out there, and I know you can attest to that, I would get called fanned out. Quite frankly, I would get called a fan. I would get called a fanatic in our, most sports community. So what is it that has this Knicks team getting that edge above Milwaukee for you?
So for Milwaukee, I'll start with them. Is they're still a theoretical team to me. That if things click completely, there's no doubt this team can be absolutely dominant. The balance, the two-man game between Dame Lillard and Giannis, and there's absolutely been stretches this year where we've seen it, where things have looked fine. But I do think there's some legitimate defensive concerns with this team. I think they very much underestimated the drop off when you go from Drew Holiday to Damian Lillard as your primary point of attack defender. And frankly, I think Adrian Griffin was dealt a bad hand in the fact that like that is not his fault, that type of downgrade. There's no schemes that you can draw up to make Damian Lillard in the same stratosphere of defender as Drew Holiday. I think Chris Middleton's my ultimate X factor for him. I'm not ready to ride and say he's still ready to be a number 3 option on that team. So I do think that there are some legitimate holes on this team, and the defensive concerns are at the top of the list. And then to swing over to the Knicks, the way I've described them throughout the season is I just feel they're such a high floor team that you know what you're getting from them to an extent. You can question if there is like maybe a shortage of the top end talent, but I think there's less that you can do that can kind of box this team in to a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. And then if you want to bring in the Doc Rivers factor, when I saw the Doc Rivers coming to Milwaukee, that basically took them off my list of contenders. That I've seen it front and center. I've seen him get out coached in many playoff series. It's very disappointing, very frustrating the way things went down in Philadelphia. And like the demons that he, did not play a player under 27 in the first 2 games coaching. It's the same Doc Rivers story. So I would give the coaching advantage to New York as well.
And you know what? You talk about Doc Rivers. There was a clip that I saw on Twitter today, and it was of Phil Jackson talking to Pau Gasol and Kobe Bryant, about the finals. And he said, listen, Doc Rivers, this team, they've blown more fourth quarter leads than any other team in the NBA. And this was going back to, the old Celtics roster. Things with Doc Rivers just don't change. The issue that we constantly see with him, he lacks adjustments. He can't turn and, come out and really fix things in a game. He can't swing momentum. And ultimately, he's not a motivator, right? You've seen the clip, the viral clip of him talking to the 76ers bench. Come on, guys. Come on. Motivate me to go print paper. It's just ridiculous that Doc Rivers is still getting these types of jobs and this type of candidacy. And now he's going to be the coach of the All-Star game. I agree entirely. I'm not looking at Milwaukee as a serious contender by any means. And even if they do, like you're saying about the Knicks, it's a very high floor. You know what you're getting out of them. The same thing with the Bucks. Just in terms of their talent, they're going to have their games where Dame goes off. They're going to have their games, where Giannis gets a 30-point triple-double, and they look great. But at that same time, you know exactly who they are on the defensive side of things. You know where their liabilities lie, and I think that's going to be their ultimate denies. And honestly, this Knicks team, I'd agree. I unfortunately, Maine's going to call me fanned out, but I agree that I think the Knicks team is easily second in the Eastern Conference right now, and that just leaves up to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, what are your thoughts on this Cavs recent stretch? And are they legitimate contenders as well? Are they somebody to keep an eye on? Or is this just a hot streak from Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, I've been very surprised to see the Cavs play at this level. I'll start by saying I'm a big Darius Garland guy, that I think he's the real deal. I love the way that he plays. And to see them have this success without him has been really surprising to me. It's interesting when you kind of connect those dots. Like, for example, with the Bulls, with Zach LaVine dropping off and they began to go on that run, you always wonder what kind of is the correlation there. Garland does not strike me as the type of guy that is, hurting your team, but from a, chemistry standpoint in that way, in the same that I think you can kind of point to with LaVine. So I've been surprised of this going while they're shorthanded. Donovan Mitchell has absolutely been on a heater and has deservingly got his all-star recognition for it. So he's doing a 3-point contest as well. I'm not as in on the Cavs as I am on the Knicks. I'm not an Evan Mobley guy either. I just don't see the quite the appeal that I think plenty of people do with me. For me, he's just like lacks a little bit. He's a guy that always leaves me wanting a little more when I watch him.
Totally agree.
Yeah, like I can squint and see it, but when you look at guys like Chet and Wemby, like to me, like they're so many more levels developed than you look at like a Mobley. And I think
what strides has Mobley really taken? Beyond, he came into the league and we were like, wow, this kid's a good rookie. Other than that, he's remained very lanky. He's a long 4. That's really all you're getting out of him. I mean, even last year, you saw in the playoffs against a guy like Julius Randle, he can't hang. So when it comes down to it, the same reason that you're talking about, with the Cavs, that I just don't see them having that dog to them that this Knicks team has. And I think last year's playoffs was just exact proof of that. The Knicks were grittier and they were just kind of more physical. Now with the addition of OG Anunoby, I definitely take this Knicks team head and shoulders, quite frankly. I think a series against this Cleveland team would end up in a sweep. So I'm taking the Knicks definitely head and shoulders above them. So where would the Sixers then? We're talking about all these other teams. Where do your Sixers rank, in this Eastern Conference playoff picture? Where do you have them finishing?
Yeah, it's tough. I absolutely think they're gonna drop. I mean, the Joel Embiid is still such an asterisk next to all this that all the reporting, the perception, the storyline, like there's still not a complete picture for what exactly is going on, and really the root of that being that they're not entirely sure which surgery he's gonna have to get until they get inside the knee. That it's either the cleanup surgery, which puts him in a out 4 to 8 week type of range, and then he would be back for the end of the regular season and a playoff push. But there's still the chance that they get in there and it needs a full meniscus repair, which would put him out for the season. And that very much dictates the direction ahead of this trade deadline, what the Sixers should be looking to do. Frankly, I still think this Sixers team is better than a lot of people are giving credit. That I think Tyrese Maxey is good enough to keep them at a floor. That I'm excited to see what he looks like as a true number one option on a night to night basis. We see the nights where he has heaters, like the other night where he dropped 51, and it was clear from start to finish he was locked in, ready. But it's a different story when you every single night are the top name on the scouting report, and it's going to be cool to see him kind of work through those growing pains during the stretch. I think they ultimately end up in probably the 5 or 6 seed. I don't think they slip all the way down to the playing game. They're still 11 games above 500, and I still think that there's other guys that we will get the random Kelly Oubre having a heater and has a 25-plus night that changes the game, things like that. And I think regardless, this team is going to add. So I'm still comfortable with them hanging in that 5 to 6 range from a standing standpoint. As far as their chances for like an actual playoff run, fully dependent on whatever's up with Joel's knee.
Yeah, it's got to be concerning too. You finally get some momentum. You have Tyrese Maxey emerging as obviously a superstar. People hate on me a lot for the term superstar. They say I throw it around, but quite frankly, Tyrese Maxey, he's going to be the face of Philadelphia sooner than later, and he is playing at a superstar level right now. The way he, like you're saying, a superstar and a star, it's totally different. But a guy that's elevating everybody on his team the way Tyrese Maxey is, I'm going to go ahead and call him a superstar. Now, a guy like Damian Lillard, we were just talking about. I honestly think Damian Lillard is out of his superstar era and is growing into more of just being a star player on the team. He's a nice name to have. He's going to give you buckets, but he's not giving you the same production on both sides. Not that he ever really was defensively, but he's not elevating the floor of your team. A guy like Tyrese Maxey, he's making everybody out there better. And this is a good comment right here from Jamal. Is Lauri Markkanen available? That would be a great fit. It's just the Jazz just don't seem to want to let up. And Danny Ainge, that guy is as stubborn as it gets. So even if you were to go out and get a package or create a package for him, he's going to want, 4 first-round picks, probably something of the sort. So what are some names you have on your radar that could kind of keep you guys in the ballpark until Embiid potentially gets back later this season?
Yeah, and I'll start by noting that Lauri Markkanen would absolutely be at the top of my list. I do think it's unrealistic that I think the Jazz are unwilling to part with them, and for good reason. That Lauri is a stud, a guy that is approaching that star category, that has made an all-star game already, that deserves to be talked even more highly of than he is. But as far as some more realistic targets for me, at the top of my list is DeJounte Murray. And this is not something that I think is super likely for the Sixers. They've spoken a ton about this cap space plan and keeping flexibility for the offseason, really only attacking names that are expiring. DeMar DeRozan's the type of name that makes sense, that fits those qualifications. But for me, I think it's really important that even if it was the healthiest and best version of Joel Embiid, I still think this Sixers team was one player away from really being in that true contending category. So for me, that you can kind of accomplish 2 things by making a DeJounte Murray trade. That for number one, you help survive this stretch without Joel. That you have another guy that can take some playmaking responsibility, take some scoring responsibility, doesn't put quite as much, not as heavy of a load on Tyrese Maxey's shoulders. And number 2, you still find that piece that could be the differentiating factor when you get to the postseason, that there does need to be a third guy. I like the appeal of Murray, that I think from a two-way guy, if you take the best versions of what he was in San Antonio and the best versions of what he has been in Atlanta, that is the player that the Sixers have been missing. And it has not all been perfect. He has his downsides, but like the talk about like the contract holding you back, just I don't agree with that. At the worst, he's going to be making $30 million in 2028. That's $10 million less than Tobias Harris is currently making. So like if we can swallow that, I'm okay with it. So DeJounte Murray would be my number 1 target.
Yeah, and the DeJounte thing is really interesting because at the end of the day, the Atlanta experiment, I don't necessarily know how many people thought that was going to work out, right? The 2-guard backcourt of that small guards, Trae Young has 0 defensive presence, so it was always going to be somewhat of an issue. And after dealing John Collins, nothing seemed like it was going to be going right for Atlanta. That seemed like just an experiment that was destined to fail. And at this point, I'm not really putting any of their failures onto DeJounte entirely. Now,
Yeah.
talking about the Sixers aside, I would not want him anywhere near my Knicks team just because he doesn't fit the mold of what the Knicks are trying to create. Now, as far as the 76ers go, I could totally see him in that scenario. Being alongside Tyrese Maxey, I think that would be a great fit. It just comes down to what would the package look like. Now, what would you be willing to give up in order to get a guy like DeJounte on the Sixers?
Yeah, DeJounte fits my category of pretty much an empty the tank. That essentially they have 3 first-round picks that they can trade at this point in time. There will be a couple more that come available come draft day, but obviously working in this specific situation that you got to operate now. So I would be willing to part with all 3 draft picks, assuming that you put some protections on them. That I'm not willing to give up 3 unprotected. I do think the Hawks are going to be seeking draft capital in return. That they seem to be heading toward that rebuilding or at least retooling path to build around Trae Young. And what I totally agree, it has not worked, the Murray and Trae Young backcourt. I do think Murray gets a worse rep than he deserves at time, that he's been dealt kind of a difficult hand. Playing next to Trae Young, as gifted as he is as a playmaker, he's so ball dominant. And I think Murray could be a guy that could use the ball in his hands way more than he currently does. I think that would be beneficial next to Maxey, because I think Maxey's frankly a guy who has the ball in his hands a little bit more than he should right now, that he is so effective as an off-ball shooter, so it makes sense. But as far as like an official deal, I see it something along the lines of a Marcus Morris from the salary standpoint, Jaden Springer from an actual young player, which at least having some interest, and 3 first-round picks. I would probably say 2 legitimate first-round picks and 1 maybe top 15 protected or somewhere along that lines.
And that looks a lot more appealing to your pockets and your assets than a Danny Ainge, trade deal that's going to end up costing you 4 or 5 picks in the long run. And I get it. I mean, the Jazz aren't letting Laurie go anywhere, but the thing is, a guy like that you have to at least call about, right? On a team like the Jazz that are just down in the dumps, they're out west, they don't exactly have a vision of what they're trying to build. Another guy over there that's probably or potentially on the move is Colin Sexton, and the value of his market. Is that a guy that you would want potentially as a kind of low risk, high reward guy that we haven't seen, reach his full potential in the NBA? But then again, he's a bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could be talked into Sexton. He's not at the top of my list. He probably, like Malcolm Brogdon's name that I would put well above Sexton in my mind. From Sexton's a guy that, like, when he gets it rolling, you feel it all over the game. But like another guy that I just feel a little underwhelmed with, like to compare him to Garland, who he obviously played next to for a ton of years or a couple years at least. I always just preferred Garland's style of play so much more, and that kind of left a sour taste on Sexton. I thought Will Hardy, the Jazz head coach, had an interesting comment about him where he said, like, I've changed all my preconceived notions of Colin Sexton from actually coaching him and how much better of a teammate and a player that he is. So I thought that was interesting. He's worth taking a flyer on in my mind, but not a guy that I think moves the meter from the Sixers from a championship perspective.
Yeah, I understand that. And like I said, he's definitely a guy that's coming out. He's giving you strictly buckets, but when he's not on, it's going to be rough. If the season ended today, who's your guys' pick for coach of the year? That's a tough one, man. And I also want to talk about this other comment that John left here. What do you guys think the chances are LeBron could sign with the Knicks in the offseason? Rich Paul said he's not getting traded at the deadline, but he still loves Brunson, and he might want to still team up. Now, let's take a little bit of a dip into this whole LeBron drama. Now, the amends were made from CAA and Clutch Sports, so that was good to see. That was nice for the sake of basketball and whatnot. You love to see that from a Knicks perspective, because now deals with Clutch representatives and whatnot could actually get done. The LeBron James thing, though, man, you always knew the Knicks getting thrown around was going to be used as leverage. They get used as leverage by with KD and his little drama before he went to Brooklyn. He was using the Knicks as leverage. We've seen it happen constantly. Kawhi Leonard even used the Knicks as leverage back in the day when he went to the Clippers. It was never serious. And I think the whole towel thing, that's LeBron just being the troll that he is, going up to DeMar Hamlin with the, Knicks towel on his back. It's tough. It's definitely, Knicks fans have laundered and constantly dreamt of a guy like LeBron James coming and saving the franchise. But to me, I don't need LeBron James at this point, right? I mean, the guy is way, way past your timeline in terms of age. I mean, just because he's still out here producing and he's still out here, giving you the box stats that you like to see, doesn't mean that his game is what it used to be. You watch the Lakers, and they're definitely not the same team that LeBron was leading, even in the bubble. He has a lot slower of a game, and it just doesn't translate to what the Knicks are trying to do. I had mentioned earlier about the identity that Tom Thibodeau is trying to build, and a guy like when we had mentioned guys like Sexton and guys like DeJounte, they just don't fit the mold of what the Knicks are creating. When we went
Yeah.
out and got Anunoby, we talked about it a little bit. That told me everything that I needed to know about what the direction, the Knicks were trying to go to. They were looking for defensive-minded players that could, shoot the ball well and have skills on the offensive side, but were mainly defensive anchors. And I just can't see a scenario where LeBron James ends up with the Knicks. Like I said, at this point, I don't even want him necessarily. If he's coming with Bronny, a few years later, then we could work something out potentially. But just LeBron James right now, I don't necessarily have interest. What are your thoughts on the whole saga going down in LA?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I'm not a LeBron guy. Never really have been. I don't know. It just comes off corny, and I've had a sour taste ever since the leaving Cleveland in the first place. And I have been less forgiving than most people with all of this. He's absolutely trolling. He's absolutely trying to put some pressure on the Lakers front office. Even the tweeting like the Statue of Liberty emoji and stuff like that. Tweeting the timer, all these things that he's up to his games with. The thing about LeBron James is, when you bring in LeBron, it's now LeBron's team. Like, he's now a guy that is running the show, pulling the strings from a stylistic standpoint, from a roster standpoint, and frankly, from the Knicks' perspective, I think you guys are well on your way of having your identity, having your path, having the play style you want, the attitude you want. To me, like, everything has moved significantly in the right direction this year, and you're very much sacrificing that by taking the crossroads to go to LeBron James. I don't think LeBron's that serious about wanting to play in New York. I think this is much more of a leverage play, stirring the pot and just putting on the pressure on the Lakers to make a move and correct this team, because there does need to be some roster moves that the Lakers need to pull out there. But yeah, from an actual Knicks perspective, I don't really think it makes sense for him or LeBron or the Knicks, to be honest.
He's just trying his best to get Pelinka to do something. But the thing is, I talked about it on Mo Sports TV probably about a month ago when we were discussing the troubles of Milwaukee and, everything that Giannis had going on. Nick has been just feeding me LeBron propaganda. I understand where you're coming from, Nick. And, if it was something, I don't know, maybe a slight 1-year deal at the end of his career, I wouldn't mind. But, he's clowned us for so long with the water bottle flipping and everything like that. We've been disrespected by LeBron for too long for me to just bow down to the king all of a sudden. But like I was saying, with all the moves being made and everything that, Milwaukee had going on, I had mentioned you can only get so much out of a franchise before they're just, you dried them out of assets. And I think that's where the Lakers not only are, but have been for a while now. You got your ring in the bubble. You got D'Angelo Russell, who honestly not many thought you were even going to be able to add a piece like that. You got rid of Westbrook as your scapegoat. I mean, what do you have left? They're offering the 2027 or 2029 first round pick, and they're waving it in front of people, hoping something could, become. Now we're seeing these ESPN trade packages. I saw one for DeJounte Murray, and it was a 3-team deal, and all that they had to give up was, I think it was Christie and that first round pick. And I looked at this trade, and there's nobody that's doing this except for, Lakers fans. It just comes down to the fact that there are no assets left. I think there's nowhere for LeBron or the Lakers to run. And I think he's just looking at the Knicks like, please help me. And everybody on the Knicks is like, we're good right now. We have, like you're saying, we have our identity. We figured out what type of play style we want to bring in this new era of Knicks basketball. And I think we're going to roll with that. Now, with that being said, there are a few guys that are getting listed as potential trade candidates. A few of them I think are not necessarily too serious. You got guys like Isaac Okoro getting thrown around as a 3-and-D guy that the Knicks are looking at. Now, I don't know why you would want a guy that couldn't shoot the 3-ball against your team last postseason. Shot sub 20% from the 3 in that series. Was very, very bad. A defensive liability, actually. You have him getting thrown around. You have guys like Bruce Brown, PJ Washington. Now, Bruce Brown, I do have some interest in. But again, how much of an upgrade is he really bringing to your team over Quentin Grimes? The Knicks had mentioned that they don't want to move off of Grimes unless this is a guaranteed upgrade. Now, from your perspective, do you think Bruce Brown is a guy that could be valued higher than Quentin Grimes to the Knicks?
I would say so, but I don't think maybe at the expense that it would take to get him. That I do think that the Raptors are going to want at least a first-round pick. That I think Masai is going to hold a pretty high bar for actually making that trade there. I think Quentin Grimes is fine. I don't think he's a guy that like you have to move on from in the way that I think some Knicks fans look at it and present it that way. He's not perfect. He has his issues and inconsistencies for sure, but I do like Quentin Grimes as a player and think that there's a little more negative connotation to him than likely should be the case. And the thing that I do like about the Knicks team specifically, it feels like everybody fits. The whole rotation, every guy makes sense. Like even I think if I had to circle a need for you guys, it would probably be a little bit in that big man position, maybe a little more size. I know Mitchell Robinson's coming back and Julius Randle's obviously out right now. So that's kind of the factors that play there. But when you look at like Isaiah Hartenstein's been mostly awesome this year. Precious Achiuwa has played the best basketball I've ever seen him play. And I frankly was a guy that I was kind of had written off after the Raptors and the Heat years. And he looks good this year. And then the rotation pieces, the Josh Harts, the Dante DiVincenzo's, Jalen Brunson, obviously, all these guys just fit together in a way that I think the Knicks should tread carefully with messing with that.
I agree. And, it comes down to a name that I had, a guy that I would like that I don't think is going to cost anything crazy, that I could see adding to this Knicks roster, Andre Drummond as a backup big, a guy that I think Chicago is clearly going to be blowing it up come deadline. This whole Zach LaVine stuff, they're probably going to be looking to get as much value out of DeRozan as they possibly can. I like Andre Drummond. He's always been a reliable guy to clean the glass. And that's really all the Knicks need right now is a big body presence. And, a guy like Drummond could potentially cost you a second-round pick and another no-name flyer. So I don't see a scenario where the Knicks make a big deal heading into this deadline. I think they're going to be very, very patient on how they move accordingly, just because, like you said, everybody has a role and all these pieces fit so perfectly. Why blow it up? The grass isn't always greener on the other side just because everyone wants to talk about this. Oh, the Knicks need a superstar to set them over the top. Listen, Jalen Brunson's been that guy. He's in MVP conversations for a reason. And the chemistry of this team is clearly through the roof when he's on the floor, like you're talking about with the Nova guys as well. And it helps when a guy like Precious Achiuwa is playing the best basketball of his career. A guy like Hartenstein is giving you almost consistent in the month of January, 10 and 15. I mean, it's been incredible what he's been able to provide for the Knicks. And I agree. The only spot that's really concerning me is that big man. But if Mitchell Robinson can come back even on limited minutes, if he's giving you 15 minutes a game and you're adding him into the mix of Achiuwa, of Hartenstein, that gives Jericho Sims completely out of the rotation. Taj, you could go back into retirement and enjoy your family. I think that would be the best case scenario is if, Mitchell Robinson comes back and even on limited minutes, he's able to give you production. And Nick asks us, chances D'Angelo Russell's still a Laker past the deadline? I'm going to go with yes. What do you think? I'm saying probably about 80%, but I think he's there.
See, I don't. I think I'm going to say probably 60% that he's in another uniform. I think I think Lakers need to make a move. That's the most glaring contract that kind of needs to be moved. And I like D'Angelo Russell. I like him. He's another guy that I think has a more negative perception than he deserves. And frankly, he's been shooting the lights out for most of this year. So it's tough to be too mad at him. But I do think that he is a guy that he'll have his nights where he shoots 8 of 10 from 3 and he'll have his nights where he shoots 0 for 11 from 3, which I like that from a shooting perspective, but that definitely gets frustrating to play with at times. I do think that that D'Angelo Russell is probably one of the more likely guys that will be moved on from in LA.
Yeah, and it says iHeart averaged 8 and 12 in January. I can't lie, that's pretty crazy for a backup center giving you coming out and starting and giving you that type of production. If you would have told me that he was giving you that going into the Mitchell Robinson injury, I would have said, you're out of your mind. I wouldn't have saw a scenario where Isaiah Hartenstein is, even a defensive anchor for this Knicks team.
Good.
But he's come out and he's proved a lot of people wrong. And I'm sure even the Clippers are regretting messing up that little tandem of him and Zubac, because I mentioned it in our group chat earlier. I made those. I said those are two guys, similar play style, both dogs though. Zubac's a name that's getting thrown around in trade rumors as well. Any team that goes out and gets him, he's a dog. These guys are giving you everything, and no pun intended, but he's got the heart, Hartenstein's got the heart to him. He is one guy that's going out there and giving you his all. And, with Tom Thibodeau, you're going to be playing the minutes. Not one of these guys has shown wear and tear in terms of those minutes having to play, even an 8-man rotation. So I'm really encouraged, like you're saying, I'm really encouraged going into this deadline that the Knicks don't need to make a move and everything's going to be all right. Just get healthy after this All-Star break. That's really going to be the big key.
And I think that it's being undersold a little bit. Like OG Anunoby was the move. That was the swing. That was the missing piece. And frankly, he's looked just about a perfect fit from my eyes so far. That shooting the ball really well, particularly from that corner 3 spot, over 50% there in a Knicks uniform, and has been over 40 throughout his career. So I do think that that's going to stick. He's not asked to do too much in a way that I think at times he was in Toronto, and I think that was a little bit of the downside for him. So for me, this has been a great fit for him, and he's been as advertised for them. And it's a little more frustrating, I would say. We're seeing the Knicks make this swing. We've seen the Pacers trade for Pascal. We've seen all these teams in the East, the Heat adding Terry Rozier. and then the Sixers just kind of sitting there and doing nothing at this point. So
Mhm.
I to kind of list off a couple other names that I would kind of like to hear your thoughts of from the Sixers perspective.
Yeah.
Guys that I like, Malcolm Brogdon, I brought up a little. I would like to see another ball handler, a guy that can take some pressure off of Tyrese Maxey's just shoulders and allow him to play off ball a little more.
Yep.
Another guy that I think is pretty likely and attainable would be Bojan Bogdanovic from the Detroit Pistons there. He's a guy that contractually it makes sense. He's on a non-guaranteed next year. And having a high volume 3-point shooter is very much up there on the list of the thing the Sixers should attack in my mind. 27th in the league in 3-point attempts per game this season, which is a huge concern to me. How about that? We'll start with those two. Any thoughts on either of those as a fit for the Sixers?
So Malcolm Brogdon, I feel like his style of play, he's one of those guys where you could kind of put him anywhere and he's
Yep.
going to find his way to thrive. He felt a little discredited with the whole Boston scenario. He said, I came out and won Sixth Man of the Year and then you shipped me off. So
Mhm.
I can understand how he kind of wants to get back in the East and has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Like you're saying, I think it would be great for Tyrese Maxey's game because you had mentioned when talking about OG Anunoby, I feel like Tyrese Maxey now, he has all this volume, and yes, he's an incredible talent, but sometimes it just becomes too much, right? You're asking a little too much of him, and he has such good off-ball talent that I think a guy like Malcolm Brogdon could definitely elevate that, and he's also a great defensive guard. So between Maxey and Brogdon, that's going to be a good duo in terms of defensive rating as well. And then you look at the bigs down low. If they get Embiid back at any point, that could be a little tandem you have going on there with the three of them. Now, in terms of Bogdanovic, one thing that I wanted to highlight was the fact that the Pistons also have interest in Tobias Harris.
True.
So could you essentially kill two birds with one stone in a deal with them, getting off of Tobias while also attaining Bogdanovic? Do you think that could happen?
I would absolutely be into that. I do think it's pretty unlikely that they do deal Tobias. That if there was a Bogdanovic trade, I think it's more likely it's of the Marcus Morris and a little bit of extra salary filler variety. I think Daryl Morey is so just intrigued of finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with his contract that in Morey's defense a little bit, so much of his work that he's done in Philadelphia has been working out of past mistakes, whether that be trading Al Horford, getting rid of Ben Simmons, dealing with James Harden, and now the Tobias Harris contract is finally coming off the books. Tobias Harris is the 19th highest paid player in the NBA that season. That is absurd and just brutal to have that type of cap commitment for a guy that just does not live up to that level of production. And I do feel for Tobias at times. He's seen his role change drastically year in and year out when there's being times where he's asked to be a number 2 option on this team and times where he's been regressed to essentially being a 3-and-D catch and shoot guy. But the bottom line is he just has not been a fit on this team. He just has not been able to deliver to the level of production it needs. And I think Morey's really dead set on getting that direct $40 million off the cap entirely and just seeing him out for the length of the season. So I'd be absolutely open to moving him. I would absolutely swap him for Bogdanovic. I just think straight up that's a better fit. But I do think that it's more likely that Morey wants to hold on to him for the season.
So if it was your decision here, would you go after more of a guard that could complement Tyrese Maxey, or are you looking at a wing player that could add that 3-point spacing?
I mean, in an ideal world, both. But if I have to prioritize one, I do lean towards the guard kind of archetype here. Tyrese Maxey has been nothing short of spectacular his time here. He's exceeded all expectations in a major way. But I do think they're doing him a bit of a disservice by just being so reliant on him. Like, it's a difficult balance to strike when you're asking this guy to be the primary playmaker, the primary scorer, the guy that has to create his shots and for others. And I think it's undersold how talented he is as an off-ball shooter. Like, some of the metrics, it's him and Steph Curry in the type of just off-ball catch and shoot numbers, which is insane. So when you have a guy that is that level, a guy that's been top 5 in the NBA in 3-point percentage the past 2 seasons, you got to give him some easy catch and shoot looks. So I think by bringing in a DeJounte Murray or a Malcolm Brogdon, that is the type of guy that can allow him to play off ball. And I don't want it to ever be taken of getting him off the ball is like a hit to him. This is a different way to maximize his game. So for me, that would take the preference. I still have concerns over the just wing defense. I want to see Robert Covington come back. That I absolutely think he's a guy that would be a difference maker on this team and a guy that deserves rotational minutes. It doesn't sound like that injury is cleaning itself up anytime soon. And he's been out for over a month now with the knee thing. So very frustrated for him. But I would say that guard would be my priority for the Sixers end.
So any other names that you were thinking of? We had mentioned Murray, we'd mentioned Brogdon and Bogdanovic. Who else is on your radar?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a name that I'm actually against, but is getting a ton of buzz, is Kyle Lowry. That we know the Philly ties guy that grew up in Philly, went to Villanova, and was traded to the Hornets in that Terry Rozier deal. Seems to be a likely buyout candidate type of guy, and that is the only guy that I've seen consistent ties to the Sixers too. I just have no interest in Kyle Lowry at this point in his career. That there was a point in time where I would have loved to have him on the Sixers, but I think for what he is right now, I don't think that's much better than what they're getting from Patrick Beverley. And for that to be like any type of the move, I'd be very frustrated with. But curious if you have a difference of opinion there.
Nah, I totally agree. I had even mentioned probably 2 years ago that I wanted the Knicks to look into Kyle Lowry when he was a free agent. But truthfully, that was the last time he had any value in the world
Yeah,
of basketball to me. You know, at this point in his career, he's a traffic cone on defense. The best thing he really can give you is his ability to draw a foul. Like, is that really at this point in his career? You know, we just got to call a spade with Kyle Lowry because he's not creating anything for himself off the dribble. He used to be one of those shorter guys that he could get to the hole. You know, he
yeah,
was a little bit swift in his movements. I don't want to say he's fast, but he's quick. And, you know, he was able to get to the hole and really find the lane in his younger days. But now, I mean, there's a reason that he is a buyout candidate, you know, not just because it's the Charlotte Hornets, but because there's just no vision and there's no kind of space for him on a team that's looking to win games. Not that the Hornets are, but there's a lot of younger options that you want to see what they have over Kyle Lowry. You know, at this point in his career, I think the only team that would even be looking at him like, oh, yeah, come here is a team like the Lakers, because like I said, they're at the end of the road when it comes to guys that they can acquire to make them better. I think maybe they go out and they look at Lowry, but I totally agree. He's not bringing anything to the table that you're not getting from Patrick Beverley. And
yeah.
Patrick Beverley, at this point, he has all the Philadelphia fans sold that he's going to be a Sixer for life. And I
He's
can't
on.
blame you. He's one of those guys, you can't stand him when you're playing against him and you're on the other team. But when he's playing for your city and he's representing, you know you're going to get everything you can. So I definitely got to tip my hat to Pat Bev because he's making his mark over in Philly.
Yeah, he absolutely is. He's been terrific. And as far as the on-court stuff, like I think when you think of Pat Bev, you always think of, the slamming the court, getting guys' faces, chirping. I
Yep.
think it gets overlooked that there is some substance to his play. Like he's been very good whenever he's been asked to step in with no Tyrese Maxey this year to be the primary guard. He's been capable of running an offense, and he's been shooting the ball relatively solid this year. So I've been very satisfied with what Pat Bev has brought to this team. And you could make an argument some of his offensive numbers this year are some of the best in his career. So surprising that he still had this in the tank at 35 years old. Yeah, I'm content with Pat Bev being the guy there. Another name that I did want to throw out, and I know this has commonly talked about one. I think ultimately the price tag is going to be a little bit too high, but Alex Caruso is a guy that I would be sold on, and I do think would be very helpful to the Sixers team. Kind of my hesitation for a while on Caruso was I was just debating like what is kind of the gap between D'Anthony Melton and Alex Caruso. That they're obviously a little bit different players, but it would concern me that like if that's your all-in move, and I'm not like entirely confident that he's that much better than D'Anthony Melton. He's definitely better, but to what extent? So
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of your vibe check on Caruso to the Sixers.
Well, like you were saying, that price tag is just looking astronomical. When
Yeah.
I saw the headline that they're seeking an OG Anunoby style deal, I cannot believe. Now, it has to just be a smokescreen and in order to get some more phone calls, but there's just not a scenario where I value Alex Caruso to that extent. Now,
Yeah.
with that being said, that doesn't mean this is any name to, just sniff at, because I do think if he was ultimately to head to this Sixers team, that's a needle mover for me. I think that a guy like that, his defensive, intangibles are really what's going to help the Sixers. And like we were talking about, it's very important to have an identity as a team. With both Patrick Beverley and Alex Caruso, those are two guys that are not afraid to get gritty when it comes to defense. And
Yeah.
they're both dogs. They have that same type of mentality. And with two guys like that, you don't have to let Tyrese Maxey do any of the dirty work. And I think having both guys like that at that guard position could definitely help. But man, this price tag is just looking really, really crazy. And apparently Vucevic is also talking about, I still think we can compete. I mean, I don't know what's going on over in Chicago, what's in that water, but it's scary because I do not see this team doing anything but, picking some more ping pong balls.
Yeah. And we got a comment from Jamal here saying, best guess, do you think we make any moves before the deadline? I think a lot of it is very dependent on the outcome of the Joel Embiid surgery. That my personal stance is, if this is something that he has the chance to return for the playoffs, you cannot afford to waste this year. That I do think these Joel Embiid injuries, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, these aren't going away. That when you have a big man with knee issues, it sucks that it is going to be a lingering thing, but we got to call a spade and acknowledge it. That you don't know how long this window is. So if he's going to come back for a playoff run, these Sixers should do everything possible to give them a chance of competing this year. I don't think they're far enough off that they should be deferring in that you still go all in this season. If it is something where he's not going to return this season, I think it's pretty likely the Sixers stay put and that this summer they get to work with all that cap space and whatever their grand plans are. But in my mind, I still think the Sixers do something, but I think it's underwhelming for what people like myself are hoping for.
Yeah, I would agree with the same, that same aspect. Because the thing is, the East doesn't really have many teams that are looking for the longevity of, contention. I mean, you look at teams that are going to be competing for the next 3 to 4 years. I'd say definites. The Knicks are in that conversation. I mean, I would hope so after building for the past decade. I would say maybe Boston. It really depends on Jaylen Brown and how he continues to develop, because he's not a 2 right now. He's clearly not playing to that level that he got paid at. So, I mean, the Sixers window is still definitely open because the East is so weak. I mean, the Pacers might have just opened up something, but I think they sped up their process by trading for Siakam. I think that was a bad move, quite honestly. I think you guys were the better fit if Siakam was to go anywhere, because I think, like you're saying, he would complement Joel Embiid, and you need the guy at that 4 position. But really, I just don't see any teams that are coming out and scaring me in terms of their bright futures in the East. So I think definitely this is a situation where Morey can look at, hey, we don't necessarily have to rush Joel Embiid back. We have Tyrese Maxey emerging as this superstar. Let him cook throughout this season. Let's make moves in the offseason that will prepare us for, the 2024-25 season. Other than that, I really don't see a scenario where the Sixers are just like pushing all their chips to the table.
Yeah, and that seems to be Morey's mindset as well. And when I speak about the window, one thing that has been very game-changing from the whole just long-term outlook is obviously Tyrese Maxey. That I don't think anybody, even as recently as this year, were sure that he could be this level of guy, an all-star this season. So that's changed a lot. And I do think that when we talk about Joel, like the injury concern is not fully going away. But I do think that there are ways that you can kind of help with that. And one of those being like scale back just the offensive and defensive load that is on him. That with Tyrese emerging, you bring in another guy, such as a DeJounte Murray, and now it's not Embiid leading the league in usage the way he has the past 3 years, or him leading the league in scoring the way he has the past 3 years. If you can, like, just reduce the amount of stress and just what you're asking out of him on a night-to-night basis, I really feel better about his chances of surviving and maintaining over the course of a season. And I do think that plays a role in the overall championship window, that maybe it isn't just right now when he is clearly the MVP, this high-level best player in the league that he is, that maybe there is a world where the best route to team success for the Sixers, with Joel being a 20-15 and 5 guy rather than a 35-12 and 4 or 12 and 6 as he is right now. So if you ask a little less out of him, allow other guys to flourish, I think there's a world where that works from a team perspective.
And just like you're saying when you were mentioning Tyrese Maxey and his off-ball presence, Joel Embiid getting scaled back. Now, this isn't saying that this is any knock to him, but like you're saying, you could find a middle ground where you're playing better basketball and you're also not putting that type of wear and tear on his knees. So that leads me into this. Now, is this the best Sixers team since you had, the Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid? Now, a lot of people wanted to count your window as closed once Kawhi hit that shot. But does the emergence of Tyrese Maxey tell you that this team has a higher ceiling overall than where that team led you?
Yeah, I do feel that way. That and I'll start by saying I don't say this lightly. I think Tyrese Maxey is the best 2-man partner that Joel Embiid's ever had. That this is the first time they can take advantage of whatever defensive set they want to throw. When you think about the Ben Simmons 2-man action, there was no threat of a jump shot whatsoever. When you think about the James Harden 2-man action, that the numbers were incredibly efficient, but it was so predictable what it was, that it was either the pocket pass from Harden to Joel, it was either getting the switch, and then it was a James Harden step back 3 on the big man, but there was no ability of Harden to explode past the guy or finish at the rim in the way that he used to be able to do. And that's an issue that is still following him out to Los Angeles. But it's been less minimized out there, but that is something that as we look ahead to the postseason, I still have concerns with Harden. When you speak about Maxey, there's like a randomness to his game that I think is really important to just keeping defenses on their toes, that he's willing to just shoot over guys from a couple feet beyond the arc if they go under on the screen. He's able to blow past guys and get to the rim, and his finishing bag is absolutely absurd, the way he can just spin it off the window and go around. And then off ball, like you can run pin downs for him in a way that you can just never do with James Harden. You can free him up with off ball motion where Joel can hit him with a pass. There's just more that I think can be done with Maxey and Embiid as the core. So I think that to me raises the ceiling of the team. And as I've mentioned throughout, I still think that they're one piece away before I would throw them legitimately in that championship contender. But I do, as a whole, this core, think the Maxey and Embiid duo does set the highest floor for this team.
Yeah, and I mean, you look across the East, there aren't many duos out there that are really giving you that type of not only production but intimidation factor to the other team. You know, you look and what is it? It's Randall and Brunson. You got Donovan Mitchell and question mark, right? Because who is that? Is it Mobley? Is it Jared Allen at times? Is it Garland? You know, and then Giannis, Dame, question mark. Like the one thing that you have is a definitive 1 and 2. And I feel like a lot of teams in the NBA are starving for that right now. And especially in a time where we're seeing so many super teams built and we're seeing so many, you know, star-studded head of the snake type of teams. I think it's really important for you guys to have that 1 and 2. Imain asks us, do you all think the Mavs make any moves to improve the interior defense? I'll let you go first, Sean.
I'll start by saying I love Derek Lively, that I think he's absolutely awesome and has been absolutely awesome for them, that I think like single-handedly might keep the Luka Doncic, like, I don't want to say around, because I think that for the most part he's likely there for the long haul, but like it's changed the ceiling of the team, having a lob threat. He's like a young Clint Capella in a way, but I think Lively ultimately will end up being the better player out of him and Capella in that situation. I could see them. I think they probably should. I saw something about them shopping Grant Williams, who I think that would be interesting there. I don't think it's a bad idea to go out there and get a guy, but I think I think personally I'm confident with rolling with Lively as your number one and taking the growing pains that come with it.
Yeah, I mean, the Mavs are such an interesting team to me because tonight you're getting Kyrie Irving and you're getting Luka for what I believe it's just the 23rd game of the season that they're playing together. And it's just, you know, we haven't been able to see this full potential. We see one guy will come out, you know, Kyrie Irving against the New York Knicks. He'll come out and he'll give you the insane production. Luka will come out and obviously give you a 50-point triple-double at any given time. It just comes down to that interior defense. And, you know, a name that I had proposed to Imain earlier today was Kyle Kuzma. I know he's not giving you much on the defensive side, but he's going to give you some facilitation. He's going to spread the floor for you, and he can run that point forward position. Yeah, he's going to clean the glass. So I don't know. Another name, I still think Andre Drummond is a guy that a lot of teams should be looking at if they need a big man. I know he might be over the hump, and I know he's not a defensive, you know, rim protector that he was back in his Detroit days, but I still think that's a big man that could give you low risk, high reward type of production. But other than that, I really do love Lively. It's really anything to get Powell out of there, right? It's just anything to get this guy off of that Dallas team because, quite frankly, he's been the one handicapping that offense and defense. You know, one guy in that starting lineup can and will, you know, hold you back to that extent. It's ironic that what they're looking for is almost what Kristaps Porzingis is, right? You know, that they need that rim protecting 4 or 5. So I think that's kind of, you know, some poetic justice in a sense. Sorry, I mean, that's just Nick's hate from me. I like Kuzma and Drummond is a rebounding machine. I'd give up Powell for him in a heartbeat. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a guy that, you know, Caruso's getting all the spotlight over in Chicago, and he's going to have the big price tag. I think Drummond's a guy that you could, you know, go over there and steal from them at a relatively low cost. So other names that I was thinking, I don't really know. The thing is, there's no defense in today's NBA, right? There's how many guys out there are you looking at? It's like this guy's defensive identity is, you know, stopping the 4 or 5 of the opposing team. I can't really think of too many guys where I'm like, he could get plugged in and the Mavs are instantly, you know, now competing in the West.
Yeah, I not a lot either. I saw a little bit of Dorian Finney-Smith talk, a little potential reunion there. I like DFS. He's definitely a guy that played his best games like in a Mavericks uniform. That during that Western Conference run, that he's a guy that stood out to me as a guy that would be very elite. And I see Jaren Jackson Jr. I think a little bit. I don't think the Grizzlies are moving on for him, but he's awesome as a rim protector for sure. Zubac is interesting. Maybe a slightly better chance at a potential deal there, but think it's tough right now. That I think this is going to be an underwhelming trade deadline as a whole. That I don't see teams kind of wheeling and dealing the way that sometimes there are. And I will point to, I do think that the play-in tournament has made an impact for how few teams are becoming sellers. That there are more teams with a chance, and I think that's what the NBA ultimately wanted, and we're kind of seeing it with the lack of trade movement.
I'd agree. I definitely agree with that point. I have another name that I would throw in there. Now, not healthy, been dealing with some injury problems in the past year, but a guy that I think would be a fantastic fit over there is Robert Williams. And if you
Love
were
him.
able to get him fully healthy on that Dallas team, I think he would complement Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving perfectly. I mean, he had a small stint with Kyrie in Boston, and they have a little bit of chemistry. And I think he's a guy that playing with a guard, especially that's as ball dominant as Luka, getting the pick and roll and just being a defensive minded big, I really think that would be a great spot. And who knows? Oh, Jalen Williams. I don't think they would do anything to give up that any of those young guys over there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Future,
Time Lord
future
Dallas.
all-star.
Yeah, he is.
The
He is.
Time
He
Lord.
is the all-star.
I
Yeah,
do.
no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, I do love Robert Williams quite a bit, and he's another guy that I wish could stay healthy because I love his game 100%, and I could see that as well. That Luka is a guy that, like, I think for the rest of his career, you must make sure you have a lob threat big man around him. That I think Lively's been terrific in that. A little bit similar to kind of like how Trae Young and Clint Capella, or even James Harden and Clint Capella back in the day. It's undersold just how efficient that is as an offensive option. That when you have a guy that can get vertical and you can put it where no one else can reach it but him, that's super efficient offense, just tossing it up, finishing around the rim. So I think that's essential to any big man that the Mavericks are looking for, and hopefully another kind of shot blocking presence there. And question for you, Matt, as we kind of wind things down a little bit here. Who do you think is the best player that does get traded at this deadline? So we talk about the lack of movement a little bit. Who do you think is the name that after the 8th, after 3:00 hits, who's the guy that we're saying that was the best player moved?
Best player. See, it's tough because there's best player and there's also best fit, right? Because I think DeJounte Murray could be the best overall player to get moved somewhere. But say Malcolm Brogdon ends up on a contending team, that's going to be the big needle mover for me. If you guys go out and get Brogdon, then I'm going to be like, hey, the Sixers are trying to make some action. You guys go out and get a guy like, say Bruce Brown, even a name that's getting thrown around a lot. I think a guy that's going to go onto a team and be a high impact 3-and-D type of dude, I think that's going to be the best, move come deadline. But other than that, I think DeJounte is the surefire star that might get moved come deadline time. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's disappointing. I think Levine would be the guy that him electing to take that surgery, which whatever that says about Zach LaVine or your perception of him, I do think that's disappointing. I think he got a little whisper that Detroit was looking like a legitimate possibility and said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to pass on that one.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately that DeJounte will be the top player traded or the biggest needle mover that way. And again, I do think DeJounte has a worse reputation than he deserves. That the best areas of his game, when we flash back to San Antonio, like he was averaging 8 rebounds a game and had a 20% rebounding rate at a point in time there and was an all-star. So I do think he's that fringe kind of caliber all-star player that can take a team to another level. I want to see him in a Sixers uniform. I don't think it's going to happen.
I agree. So as we wrap up here, one last thing I want to ask you. Come, say, April, we're looking back on this. What is it that we're discussing when it comes to the Philadelphia 76ers and how they want to approach this summer?
I think this summer is going to be the true Daryl Morey test that he keeps continuing to harp on, as I mentioned, unworking mistakes from previous regimes of working out of contracts, freeing up cap space. This summer will be the first chance for Daryl Morey to truly put his fingerprints on this entire roster, to build what he sees as a true contender around Joel Embiid. So I think this will be kind of the defining point. I think ultimately I'll be frustrated about the lack of movement at this trade deadline, how there is probably 1 to 2 small deals, and that's it. When, again, dependent on the Joel Embiid injury, if he is coming back at any point this season, the Sixers should be trying to win a championship this year. But I do think from Daryl Morey's perception that he does have a little bit longer view than I do, that he does want to worry about maximizing for the remainder of Embiid's career, not putting all the chips in now. So I think that we're going to be looking at an empty cap space that at this current time, it's Joel Embiid, it's Paul Reed, it's Jaden Springer, and then it's whatever Tyrese Maxey re-ups as. Those are the only 4 commitments that these Sixers have on this roster. So there's going to be a lot of work to do this summer.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it a rebuild, but a retool is definitely in the horizon when it comes to Philadelphia.
Absolutely. And I kind of have pushed back at the notion that, like, I just don't see these big time players changing teams in free agency really anymore. Like Jalen Brunson's probably the best player to change teams just in straight up free agency in recent memory. Like there's so much more common of it works for both sides, obviously, because teams don't want to let stars leave for nothing. So they would rather trade them and work together. Like DeJounte Murray, who we've just talked about, his extension that he signed last offseason has not even kicked in yet, that he's still on the final year of his initial deal. That is intentional from the Hawks. So they knew that when they re-signed him, that this might not work out, but at least we know this guy's not going to walk for free. So we inked him to this amount of money. We can now ship him and at least get something in return, even though this clearly is not working. So I've kind of been a little bit frustrated on these Sixers end of, I don't see the white elephant out there that is the missing piece in free agency. I just am not overwhelmed by the class. And I'm curious. I'm a little nervous that they're going to handcuff themselves by not having like tradable contracts on the books. But that Daryl Morey obviously has a plan, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and if I'm a Sixers fan, I'm not pushing the big red button, if the deadline comes and goes, because like you're saying, the summer is really where you're going to reevaluate things. And unfortunately, with Joel Embiid, you're not going to know until you're literally in that knee what is going on and what the future holds. That is such a crazy thought that the entire Sixers organization and the entire fate of a franchise falls on just what this doctor sees when he opens up his knee.
Yep, and we know that he's getting meniscus surgery. It's just the question of to what extent. Is it repairable? Does it need a full meniscus repair? Is this something that's a quicker fix? So it does suck that like they're not going to know that. I have heard it sounds like he's going to get the surgery tomorrow, so then they should have some answers from that. But you got to act quick after that because there's not a lot of time until the deadline. If there is the potential for him to return this year, you got to get working the phones right away. If not, I do think this is unfortunate, a bit of a lost season. But how about the Knicks perspective? What if we check back this summer? Are we already just getting ready for the championship parade, or what's the vibe check there?
Listen, it really depends for me how quickly we could get Julius Randle back. This reevaluation that comes at the end of the All-Star break and when things are all said and done, that's really going to determine for me, because I don't think that they're going to make a big splash at the deadline. I think we could see a guy like Bruce Brown or maybe a guy like Brogdon, but you're not going to see any big superstar on the move, especially not to New York come deadline time. But I think, like you're saying, everybody on this Knicks team fits perfectly, and you've had such great chemistry since the OG Anunoby trade, had incredible success. So I think the biggest thing for us right now is get everybody healthy, get potentially Mitchell Robinson back in this lineup, and see what this team could give you at full force, because really, we haven't seen the full potential of this Knicks team, and that's pretty scary considering, what damage they've been able to do in the second half of this season and what's to come. Because that first half of the schedule was absolute madness. We played the Bucks 4 out of the 5 times. We played Boston 3 times. We were on the road constantly. Now we've had this homestand. We've been able to go streaking quite a few times. So that's really, and Nick says beat Boston. That's all I got. Yeah, that's really it. Beat Boston by any means, and I think it's going to be a big successful season. No one's beating Boston. It's tough, man. It really is tough because I don't look at them as like a untouchable or Teflon. What do you think? Or do you think that they're this big powerhouse?
I don't as much as people make out. They're obviously the best team in the East and probably the best team in the NBA this season. They're very good. I don't want to diminish that, but I don't think. I think sometimes they're talked about like this is the KD Golden State Warriors, and I just don't think they're that like Jason Tatum has his ebbs and flows as a guy that will get hot, will get cold, and when you're so reliant on just like the tough step back jumpers and the way his shot diet really is, like I have trouble fully buying into that. I do think Porzingis is a game changer for them, and specifically when we talk about the matchup with the Sixers, that very much concerned me that Embiid is at his best when he's able to protect the rim. Porzingis is a guy that stretches him outside. So I was very concerned by that. Derek White's awesome, but Jaylen Brown's underperformed a little bit. There's still a part of me that think the lack of like legitimate point guard play could show up to hurt them, but they're so big on the defensive side of the ball as well. So yeah, they're the real deal, but I do think that like they're not unbeatable in a 7-game series in the way that people make them out to be at times.
Yeah, I mean, especially let's talk about last season, how they went out, right? Because if you're able to go out to just a team with Jimmy Butler, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, I mean, who knows now what could happen this year? And I think that's slightly in their heads. I think Jason Tatum, I look at him as a guy, we want to give him this nod of being, a Kobe disciple and everything like that. He loves to talk about that Mamba mentality. But quite frankly, he is, like you're talking about his shot diet, he's not that. He wants to be. He wants
Yeah.
to shoot those tough fadeaways and get those crazy shots. But the truth is, his game is at his best when he's driving to the lane and using his size to his advantage. He just doesn't do that. And then Jaylen Brown, you have on the other side of things, which entirely a one-handed ball player who is struggling. He's really struggling to find his identity now with Porzingis and Derek White both thriving in that team. So I'm really curious to see how they mesh come playoff time. But I don't know. I'm not considering they took two bad offensive spacers and added a great one and an above average one. I'm just not bought in entirely that, like you're saying, this team is a powerhouse or anybody that, oh, nobody's coming out of the East. I definitely do think that they're human and they bleed too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of the same mindset as you. I mean, the Porzingis stuff definitely plays into Joe Mazzulla and the way they want to play. I'm also not the biggest Joe Mazzulla guy that I have questions about him come postseason time. That's been a great source of optimism from the Sixers perspective this year, is finally having a guy like Nick Nurse that I am confident in having the coach advantage. I think Mazzulla still has shown his poor colors at times in the postseason last year for sure, and a little bit of stubbornness. I think there's some inherent stubbornness in him that can be a downfall. That obviously you want your confidence in your decision making, but Mazzulla strikes me as the kind of guy that it will be the downfall of him being committed and stubborn to his decision making when sometimes you got to adapt on the fly. So I was curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, I'm not ready to roll over to Boston in the same way. And once again, to make it from the Sixers perspective, we've yet to see him go on this type of tear. When Joel Embiid plays his best, he's the best player on that floor. And we've seen how much one player can make an impact, just as Jimmy Butler did against him last year. So that's what gives me optimism. And as great as Tatum can be at times, I think his peak is not as high as Joel's. And that's what gives me optimism for why they are vulnerable.
There we go. I think you summed it up best, quite truthfully, because there's nothing else about this Boston team you could like. You have to tip your hat, but like you said, I'm not rolling over for them. Like I do think they're very talented, but when I look at them, it's just we didn't even. Hey, Nick, we acknowledge the Bucks. Nobody's taking them. Nobody is taking them seriously, and that is the Doc Rivers effect because he is definitely a hindrance. And like you're saying, come playoff time, you're talking about Missoula. Doc Rivers, that's a whole, you've seen it. You've witnessed it firsthand and experienced it. It's nobody I am necessarily sweating over when it comes to getting out-coached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And for the Joel is out comment here, he very well could be. That this very well could be the rest of the season, that this is a washed year. But until they get in this knee and see, I'm going to keep holding out hope, I guess. And there is a world where the best just situation for Joel is he's resting for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then he's got just a playoff stretch that we've never seen him be fully healthy in a playoff run. The lone exception to that being in that bubble against Boston, which was a sweep. And Ben Simmons was out with the back injury for that one. And Al Horford was on the team, so I barely even count that. We've yet to see Joel just have this completely healthy and completely dominant playoff run. So it is very optimistically glass half full thinking here. But there is a case where this works out in the best situation for the Sixers as a team. I hope that's how the cards break. I'm not willing to go to the bank and bet that being the case right now, but I can still be hopeful.
No, definitely got to have hope. And the same thing, I mean, the same thing could be said for Julius Randle and his situation. It could have very easily came out that he had some sort of, damage or tear in that labrum. And then all of a sudden we're looking at the same thing, just praying that, hey, maybe he can come back for playoff time. But right now, same thing goes for Julius Randle that it does for Joel Embiid. I'm hoping he just can get healthy and really rest up, because come playoff time, we're going to need him to produce. And I think that's when, he's going to be at his best instead of working and getting run down, playing in the All-Star game, which means absolutely nothing. Let's rest up and let's wait for this playoff push in the second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was great chopping it up today, Matt. You have any final thoughts or what else you got cooking around at Mo Sports and everything else you got going on?
Well, man, being quite truthful, I've had some crazy stuff going on in these past few weeks. I just got a brand new Canon R5C video camera.
Wow.
Quick shout out to my guy Dean and Mamakos Media. We have a big thing coming over. He's an agent for the Philadelphia Eagles and Devontae Smith, kind of a middleman for some of their marketing deals. So I'm going to be doing some behind the scenes stuff over there. Going to be working. I'm actually going to be going to a dinner with the Sixers and over the All-Star break because he has a tie with them. So I'm going to be going over and shooting, with that camera, doing some videography work. I'm going to see if I could get any drops to, report back to you guys with. But there are going to be some big things in the works, and I'm really excited to share. How about yourself and PickSwap?
Yeah, hell yeah, that's awesome to hear, man. So congrats on all that. Looking forward to checking it all out. But
Thank you,
still,
bro.
yeah, still plugging along here on PickSwap Media. We'll have our usual episodes coming out. Also growing over on Sixers Digest for kind of a little short form video content that you can check out everything on there. And then Fox the Gambler still plugging away with Picks and Roll with Sean Brace, dropping a couple times a week. The Tough Cover Radio Show 11 to 1 every Saturday. So make sure to stay posted by that. And best way to kind of keep tabs on everything is just follow me on Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. But check out PickSwap Media on all socials, and check out Fox Sports The Gambler on all socials as well.
You guys heard him. For all the guys coming out from Most Sports, make sure you drop Sean and drop PickSwap. Everything that he is producing is fantastic work. Make sure you guys go over there and show some love. Tell him that we sent you. Yeah, Sean, thank you for having me on. I appreciate all the collabs. I'm really excited to keep all this stuff rolling and continue to work with you and see how we both grow along this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate it once again, and definitely will be revisiting something like this as the trade deadline passes us, playoffs get closer, and everything else. But appreciate everyone for tuning in. Make sure you're just subscribing and following along on all the platforms that we do have going, both for Most Sports and PickSwap for sure. Thank you guys once again, and we'll be talking with you next time.
Let's go, Knicks.